Welcome to another day of How to ABL. Today is Universal Female Fracture Day. It is 8/27/2023. So I'll briefly talk about the rotation I'm using, show you it in action, and if you want to stick around, I'll give you additional information after. So I'm going to be using Jean Grey today with a Rage. She's basically a spam character. All of her skills can technically be canceled right away, except for 5, 3, and 1. It's advisable to wait like half a second, like not real long, but you can give a little bit of delay. So typically what I like to do is stick to the core center skills and save 5 and 3 towards the end, just given that extra cooldown. Now, your 7 and your 6 will actually be available together, and doing a 7 into 6 right away and then continuing to cancel is advisable. It's also possible for your 7 to recharge in between. So you use 7 by itself and then a 7/6 in every other rotation, most likely. Again, spam these skills as quickly as possible. I tend to find I do better. Also, turning down your graphics, especially if you're on an emulator like I am, turning down your graphics allows there to be less lag. So if your phone can't handle it, or if you're using an emulator, turning it down to very low for the graphics setting can kind of help boost your score a little bit because you can move around a little bit better. So let me go ahead and show you it in action, and then we'll go into additional information if you want to stick around. Let's go. So I'm going to switch right away, and then I'm going to do a 4, 2, 1, 3 for a second, 5 for a second, 7 as soon as it's available. 2, 2, 1, basically just whatever's there. So I'm not going to call out every skill, just because, as you'll notice from my playing, let me get a little bit closer to him, that I'm pretty much using these right away, and I am canceling 6 right away. You do not have to wait for the wings to pop. That was the older uniforms. And you'll notice here that I'm using my 7 to cancel, which is why I have the striker I do. I'm not waiting. I'm using my skills anyway. As soon as he raises his sword in the air, you can go ahead and use your cancel striker. And specifically right now, I'm using Deadpool. I'm using him with the Gwenpool uniform, so like the pink uniform. It's the one that's able to cancel today. There are other options, and we'll talk about them in a few here. Let me go ahead and get that other orb. Cool. Since your 2 moves you around a lot, if you have a lot of enemies around, it can pull you away. So if you save, or I'm sorry, if you use 2 first instead of saving it, you can kind of force yourself to stay next to him. Oh, yeah, I better be able to cancel here. Cool. I'll say if you can't cancel your skills, he like jumped away from me. It can hurt. Make sure you pay attention to these orbs and pick up all the orbs. So if you see that purple light dropping down, you might want to pause your rotation for just a second to make sure you can go grab it. By canceling 2 into one of your other skills, as you can see, it can kind of lock you in place. Alright. Okay, let me grab that really quick. My 7 and 6 are slipping away from each other. That's fine. Just use 7 as soon as it's available. You don't really need to save it, especially with Jean because of her spam abilities. You don't need to save it until he drops center because you'll charge it up quickly enough by the time he jumps with the second orb right here. So you'll have plenty of time. As soon as he's targetable, I start going into my rotation. When he raises his sword, I hit my 7. It's going to cancel for Fracture, especially if you're using Deadpool as the striker. But like I said, after this, we'll talk about additional information, other options, and different things you can do to build out your characters. All right, let me grab those orbs. And as you can see, it's just about spamming. Really is with this character, with this uniform. You want to try to get off as many attacks as you can and charge up that 6 to constantly spam that 6. Okay, there's that last orb for Odin's Force. Matanner from After 5 Avengers Alliance, which is the one I'm in, run by Mayhem in My Hands, is the one who gave me this way of playing her, and my scores have just skyrocketed from the constant spam and instantly canceling 6 compared to what they used to be. So 8 million is not a great score, but it's also not a terrible score. So it's reasonable. There are other rotations. There's different ways to play characters, and you can try out different things if you want to, but this is the one that I tend to use. So let's give a little bit of additional information if you're interested. Really quick, I'm going to write down my score because I always try to write down my scores so I can track how well I'm doing. 8052265. Cool. 80522. Let's see. Yeah, that's right. 265. Cool. Yesterday for open day, I ended up getting 9.9 million with Jean, so it's always different when you use different characters and different strikers. Deadpool's not an optimal striker for Jean, and in fact, it probably brings my score down just a hair, but, you know, you work with what you work with. Let me turn up the graphics just a hair. Like I said, putting them on very low is helpful. Let's talk about my account first, because knowing what your account can do will affect what your score can do. So if you can't do like 8 million, which I don't think a lot of players can do, there's a reason for that. It's usually your account. So looking at my cards to begin with, Pierce is incredibly important for ABL. My Pierce is at 16%. If I had 25% Pierce, I'd be doing a lot more. But anyway, here's my overall stats. If you're doing ABL, you probably have a good idea what needs to be built. If not, you can check out my other videos on that. But here's my cards. And here's my X swords, because both of these are going to boost your entire account for all game modes. So that's what I'm working with as far as boosts go with X swords and cards. Let's look at my Jean, see how she's built. So obviously the best uniform for Jean is Dark Phoenix. So if you have that, she's definitely, in my opinion, meta for today. With this, you'll see stuff like I have a brilliant CTP of Rage on her, which is fantastic with Enraged. It's better than all attack, in my opinion, especially for ABL. I do have a 1.2% basic damage increase per 1% of dodge rate and crit rate. So all good stuff there. I do have a mythic uniform. If you want to know the uniform options for Dark Phoenix, I'll go ahead and show them to you. Blade Vampire Slayer, Maya Lopez, Marvel Studios Hawkeye, Professor X Classic, Gilgamesh, Marvel Studios Eternals, Scarlet Witch, Marvel Studios 1 Division. With the artifact, I do not have her artifact here. I do have a type match, tier 4. Type match is important for instinct damage. Instinct damage helps you out even more. It's only at a +7, but, you know, it's reasonable. ISO 8 set, I'm sporting an Overdrive, as you know, or should know if you're playing ABL. The attack sets are the meta. Overdrive, Hawkeyes, and POA, Power of the Angry Hulk. I prefer Overdrive, specifically on Jean, but if you can get any attack sets, you're in good shape. Get them all to 6 red stars, just to make sure you're getting maximum usage out of that attack set. The skills here, I always maximize my skills. As mentioned, I'm using Deadpool. Specifically, I'm using Deadpool in his, let's see. What is the name of this? I forget what the name of the uniform is. Anyway, it's this pink uniform here. I don't think it's absolute mental power. That's interesting. That's like the bonus from putting your striker in there. But anyway, I don't remember what the name of the uniform is for him. Basically, what you're looking for when you're picking your striker, as you can see here, it says Fracture. It seems like Deadpool, based upon suggestions from other Alliance members like Neck. He recommends that you use Deadpool over someone like Gambit, who also has that Fracture ability. Oh, here we go. So this is called April Pulls. Okay, there we go. That's the name of the uniform, April Pulls. If you don't have the April Pulls, you might not have Fracture on it. Since I have all the uniforms in the game, I try to get whoever's optimal. All right. I'm sorry. All the uniforms but one in the game. For all of the Urus and stuff like that, I have everything amplified. I know I'm kind of blocking it with my chair here, which I cannot turn because the arm's under the table. But anyway, let me hide myself for a second, or move myself. There you go. So you can see. Yeah, I've got Odin's Blessings on a lot of them. I've got everything amplified. If you're going to put Urus on your character, please do at least a 5-star Uru. Don't put anything less than 5 stars. 6 stars, obviously, is preferable if you want to maximize it. And, of course, I have her at a tier 4. Here's her overall stats. I'll show you them. Exceeded stats. I mean, idealistically, I do want to cap on attack speed as well. But ignore defense is a must. Skill cooldown is a must. Attack speed, crit rate, crit damage, and dodge are all important ones to try to boost up as much as you can. So that's my overall build for my Jean. Let's talk about teams and alternate options for today and why I picked the teams that I did. So if I go back over here to Alliance Battle. All right. So I'm using Satana's leadership. So specifically with this uniform, she is doing an increased fire damage of plus 70%, which I kind of find is important. But with this uniform, she also has an additional boost that she gives. And I believe it's a specific uniform. No, it's not a specific uniform one. It's just, gives it more by having her uniform. I think if you don't have her uniform, it actually decreases her leadership, if I remember correctly. So yeah, 60%, you get that extra 10% boost by having this uniform. I don't think any of her passives actually end up helping Jean, so the main reason I do it is for that 70% leadership that she gets. So she's definitely the leadership slot. None of her other passives do anything for Jean or for this team. But if you have Satana, I recommend using her for the lead. Jean doesn't have her own leadership, so you need some sort of a lead. Now, I'm using Morgan Le Fay. Specifically, I'm using Morgan Le Fay with the Fallen Souls uniform, and I do have an insight on her. Putting an insight on one of your characters for ABL and ABX is important to increase that score. I see right around a 500,000 score increase by having an insight on one of my characters. The uniform itself, let me show you why I'm doing it. There is a uniform effect. So all universal types, with Jean being a universal type, specifically with the Dark Phoenix, because one of them actually, I think Marvel Girl makes her a blast character, it gives an increase of all basic attacks by 35, but it also gives what I consider to be the best support ability in the game, which is damage dealt, which increases by 35%. So both of those are being affected. It also adds the debuff thing just by being on the team, but it's mainly for this top one for ABX that I'm choosing her. Now, there are alternatives. For example, Angela. Angela, with her newest uniform, also has a uniform effect that you can consider, but her uniform effect is only damage dealt for 40%. I feel like that 35% all attack plus 35% increased damage dealt is advisable. And if you're using Jean Grey Dark Phoenix, she is a villain, and this only helps superhero allies. So there's two reasons that I'm using Morgan Le Fay over Angela, even though Angela is also insight worthy. Other options, of course, you can look at other leaderships. Scarlet Witch does a pretty decent job. Not only is she a self-lead, so you could double support her. For example, you could double support her with Angela. So you could have Angela and Morgan Le Fay with Scarlet Witch's leadership. And she is pretty useful, but she's a tier 3 character versus a tier 4, and I have a brilliant CTP of Rage on my tier 4 character. So in my opinion, it's a no-brainer. Hela also makes a great leader for any of your Blast Energy characters. Thena's a decent leader. I don't really consider her to be advisable to use in place of someone like Scarlet Witch. So I would use Scarlet Witch or Jean. Phyla-Vell has fallen off as being a very good support character, but if you don't have any other options, Phyla-Vell is still a reasonable support character. Now, she doesn't have a uniform, so what she's going to do is increase all basic attacks by 30% and increase skill damage by 25%. So, and there's an increase of bonus damage of 15 as well. So she does do some boosts, but it's just basic boosts versus damage dealt. So even though she's usable, you have better options. Medusa has fallen off so much, you could still use her if you had no one else. But yeah, my number one is going to be Jean and Dark Phoenix, hands down, followed by Scarlet Witch, specifically in the Marvel Studios Doctor Strange 2 uniform. So if you have either of those characters built, use them. Supergiant would probably be my third. If you have Supergiant built and you have her with a Judgment or something, you could consider using her. But again, my opinion, this right here is the meta team for today for ABL. Only other thing to talk about, I think, would be the fact that Jean can work not only with a Rage, you could use a Judgment. From most of the people that I've talked with, there seems to be more success in ABL specifically by using a Rage over using a Judgment. So it's not that you can't use a Judgment for her. I would just advise using the Rage instead. She's not proc friendly, as you can tell, because she's a spam character, so you absolutely want either a Rage, idealistically, a Judgment, or at the very least an Anger proc if you don't have the ability to get one of the other CTPs. So that's kind of a high-level overview. Those are things that I would consider and teams that I would advise for today. If you found this video helpful at all, consider thumb-upping and leaving a comment below because it helps the algorithm. So anyway, thanks for watching, have a good one, and may your ABL scores be as high as possible.